It started with the freezing rains the night before.
And then it turned to snow. It was our coldest snap since the 1920s.
At first, we thought we were okay. We had power and we had heat. And then things started to get scary.
So rotating outages are underway across the state right now.
The organization that runs the Texas power grid called for rolling blackouts.
The big question, of course, is how long will these outages last?
We watched the clock. We waited for the power to come back on. 41 minutes, 42 minutes. For us, the power never came back on.
What were supposed to be rolling outages turned into hours and then days without heat and electricity. 4 million in Texas were without power, and 40% of Austin had no power.
We live in a cute old house. It doesn't have insulation. It isn't built for this. We could see our breath. We could see water freezing.
We heard about babies without formula and water to mix it. Elderly people freezing in their homes.
So we made a call for volunteers with four-wheel drive vehicles to help. Fortunately, there are a lot of four-wheel drive vehicles in Texas.
I was with my truck just helping tow cars on the side of the road. They were stuck everywhere.
But the call for four-wheel drive vehicles was just the beginning. Warming shelters were quickly becoming overwhelmed, so we asked our network churches if they could open the doors as additional warming centers for individuals and families impacted by the power and water outages. And just when it couldn't get any worse, millions across the state lost water.
We couldn't wash dishes. People were melting snow to flush toilets. Our pipes had burst, so we had to leave our house.
So we were really stretched. Our own staff were dealing with no water, no power. Several of our key leaders had COVID, so they were unable to help us. At one point, it felt so overwhelming, but yet, in the midst of that storm, God provided.
Our church began to respond, as did so many other local churches. We wanted to know how we could help alongside ADRN.
The Austin Fire Department's dispatch team was so overwhelmed with emergency calls from people who were freezing in their homes that they began to redirect callers to call ADRN's survivor hotline number so their four-wheel drive volunteers could pick them up and take them to warming shelters.
We were on call after call for people desperately looking for help.
I helped one family with young kids whose ceiling had caved in from water damage. I drove them to a warming center. It was just person after person who needed help.
It was amazing how many volunteers were brave enough to venture out in the single-digit temperatures, to volunteer at shelters, to drive those icy streets to pick up people who needed rides to the warming shelters, and even deliver food and baby formula and water to those in need.
It was the most amazing and rewarding feeling to show up with food, water, and blankets just in time for a lot of people whose lives depended on it. People were so grateful to have someone show up and help them when they least expected it.
To see so many other churches respond was so life-giving. Our kids were watching the way we loved each other and cared for our neighbors.
The response wasn't just in Austin. People around the world were responding to the disaster. News stories started to spread around the country to what ADRN and local churches were doing in Greater Austin. The Paramount in downtown Austin told everyone where they could help. Jennifer Aniston, Anne Hathaway, and Michael Dell even pointed to the good works that were happening in Austin. ADRN had never seen such an overwhelming response of love and support from around the nation.
We needed all the help we can get. You know, the snow was beginning to melt, but then the problems are just getting started. We knew it would take a massive effort to help families deal with the aftermath.
We were bringing water and baby formula just a few days before. Now volunteers were mucking out houses and taking out collapsed trees. It was amazing the way the church responded.
This is a story of so many survivors who didn't know where to turn for help. But when they needed help the most, the local church was there through the Austin Disaster Relief Network. We saw their smiles and heard their amazing stories, yellow shirt volunteers serving so faithfully. They said things like,
"Thank you for helping when I was at my lowest."
Thank you for bringing blankets when we were freezing.
Thank you for bringing water when we were thirsty.
Thank you for listening when no one else would.
Thank you for being the hands and feet of Jesus in Greater Austin.
At ADRN, we say disaster can strike anywhere, at any time, when we least expect it. None of us expected the snow to cripple us, but the way the church responded through ADRN was something we will never forget.
It's been so amazing to see what a network of churches can do. So many people get to see the goodness of God through His church. Many end up turning to Him through this entire process. This is why we exist.